Hello and welcome back to the ILTV News Podcast. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor. I have with me today two very special guests. First, MK Moshe Tur-Paz. He's the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, a member of the Yesh Atid Party, and newly named co-chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. In addition, I have Joshua Reinstein, Director of the Christian Allies Caucus and the President of the Israel Allies Foundation. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Great to be on the show.
Well, I want to get started. You were just named as the co-chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. And while I know you've been a longtime member of this caucus, the truth is when we talk about Christian Zionism and we talk about connections with Christian evangelicals, we often think of very conservative politicians and more right-wing politicians. And I'm curious, how did something like this get exciting for you? And what made you decide to take such an active role?
Well, I think when I came into Knesset about 4 years ago, I was immediately introduced to the caucus, and I found great friends of Israel. And maybe the most surprising thing was to learn and to hear that the Christian friends of Israel that are all part of the caucus sometimes look at us better than we look at ourselves. So I found great, I could say, Zionists in the caucus, and then we started to, to get to know each other and to relate. And I said, wow, this is a place I want to be in. This is the place I want to be part of. And I think it's always bilateral. It's always on all parts of the house. So in Parliament, you have friends from all parties that understand the importance of connections between Jews and Christians and between the friends of Israel around the world. That's where I want to be.
It's fascinating. I mean, safeguarding certainly our Western and our Judeo-Christian values has become something that is much more important today as we've seen radical Islam and extremism really starting to take over the dialogue. What do you see the role of the caucus, today, post-October 7th, when this extremism has become even more pronounced?
So I think maybe the number one challenge is to bring the voice of Israel to places that it's not heard of. And because there's something very, I think, authentic about the voice that the Friends of the Caucus bring, they can, bring the voice of Israel much louder and much clearer. So that's one role in bringing Israel's side on parliaments around the world, huge communities that see themselves, sometimes puzzled because they hear sometimes a BDS voice and sometimes just anti-Semitical voice, and they don't hear anything else. So that's something very crucial to the voice of Israel around the world. And then I think it's also very strengthening for us, the Israelis, because we sometimes look around the world and we see no one that is on our side. And I think that's something very crucial for the Israelis. So I think those are the two sides of the main mission after the 7th of October.
And Josh, can I flip to you to answer the same question? I mean, you've been the director. How long has the caucus been around?
Almost 21 years now.
Wow, so for 21 years, and certainly after October 7th, though it has changed, I'm sure, like everything else in the world, but for us Israelis at least. So, tell me, what are your thoughts on the role of the caucus now?
Well, since October 7th, I think the role of the caucus and the Israel Allies Foundation has been critical. We've basically become the diplomatic Iron Dome of the State of Israel. We have 54 sister caucuses in 54 countries around the world, about 1,500 legislators in our network, and they've been working hard since October 7th to make the case for Israel. So not only do we have the grassroots Christians and the Christian media and the Christian leaders standing with Israel, but we've turned that Christian support into real political action through faith-based diplomacy.
And when you talk about 54 caucuses, just give me a hint as to where some of these caucuses are, because I know it's pretty diverse.
Oh, we have the Congressional Israel Allies Caucus in Washington, D.C., the Canadian Parliamentary Israel Allies Caucus, but we have 20 caucuses in Europe, including the EU. We have 12 in Latin America. We have 16 in Africa. We have in Australia, Papua New Guinea. We have caucuses on 6 continents, and it's become the largest network of pro-Israel legislators in the history of the State of Israel.
Amazing. Now, if you can jump in here, Moshe, in terms of the Trump administration, we're getting ready to have what some assume will be sort of a golden era under President-elect Donald Trump, another less than, I guess it's a month until he takes office. What are your expectations for how things will change in the role of the evangelicals in Israel in the new or returning Trump era?
Yeah, so I do hope we will see a much stronger tie between the two countries and between the leadership of the world as I can call the United States today, will be on Israel's side much stronger with a much louder voice, facing Israel's challenges. I mean, we have faced Iran in the last year in a way we have never done in the 76 years of Israel. Now we need the Americans there with us. I mean, this is a huge challenge for Israel. We have faced anti-Semitic voices in the world. When we have Donald Trump and the administration of the United States with us, that's a totally different battle or way to fight that battle. And again, I do hope our friends in the new administration will see, will make the strong voice and the strong leadership helping Israel with its challenges. And we know we may have new challenges coming up, and we know today we have a strong friend in the United States, in the Congress, and in the White House, and that's a big, big thing for Israel.
But as we know it, it's really the Evangelical Christian base that helped to put Trump back in the White House. Certainly he received quite a number of popular votes, so it's not only the Christians, but it is certainly the large majority. So, I mean, doesn't that impact your work in the caucus as well if you have so many supporters now as being part of that administration? I mean, you mentioned some of the top senior roles are now people that came from, the chevra, let's call it, that you were working with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's unbelievable what's just happened. We've had a Purim moment in Israel where everything that was made for bad turned to good. Mm-hmm. The Trump administration is going to be the most pro-Israel administration in the history of American-Israel relations, including the last Trump administration, which was probably the greatest supporter of Israel in history. And this is because the base of the Republican Party are Bible-believing Christians. And a lot of the people that he's putting in positions, Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, you got Mike Huckabee coming over as the first evangelical ambassador. These people, and a lot of the other people as well, are people who support Israel not just because it's important politically or important economically, but it's important because of faith. And that's a type of support that can't change. So we're very excited to start this administration off right on January 20th.
Yeah. Now let's talk, though, a little bit about Christian support for Israel, because the truth of the matter is that it's somewhat controversial, or at least it has been in the past. Some people have questioned whether or not we should be so close with the Christians. Talk a little bit about that, MK Tur-Paz, if you can, and why you feel that it's so comfortable today when I would say even 2 decades ago people were really hesitant.
Well, I must admit I don't really understand the dilemma. I mean, as a Jewish believing person, a person and an observant Orthodox Jew, I think that connection is only for good. I mean, I heard those voices in the past, and today, as far as I see it, when I see a person that believes in God like I do, and believes in the Bible like I do, although he practices differently, that could be a huge friendship for me. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to connect around those voices, those scripts. And, whatever I learn and pray 3 times a day, and he's an observant Christian in the world, and he has his way of practicing, and yet he believes in Israel, he believes in the Promised Land, he believes in the same, I think, Bible. So we speak the same language, and I relate to those people very strongly as an Orthodox Jew.
Amazing. Josh, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think at the beginning when we started 21 years ago, people had trust issues, and it's understandable. We had to build this new relationship between Jews and Christians in the 21st century. But as we've begun to build this relationship, we've seen that Christians are tried and true as friends and allies. And 80% of the diplomatic successes we have is because of faith-based diplomacy now. So I think that we've gotten past that getting to know you phase, and people understand that there's nothing more powerful than Christian support for Israel. There's 15 million Jews and 1 billion Christians, but together we're 1,015 million. And I think we see that. Now, a lot of people obviously have issues with Christian theology and end-time theology. I don't when it comes to that because I believe in Judaism, and I believe that my end-time theology is going to happen. And, Jews, maybe what Christians would find what Jews believe is going to happen when the Messiah comes offensive to them. But let's just work together until the Messiah comes, and then we'll see, one of us is going to have a change of heart. I think it's going to be the Christians, but we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I have actually the same philosophy. I always say that, just wait till the end of days. Why do we need to deal with it now? We should get to the end of days,
Exactly.
But, I'm wondering if you can share any concrete examples since October 7th of where that that faith-based diplomacy that you just mentioned has actually worked. That you mentioned 80% of our successes, but since October 7th, it has not felt very internationally successful in the United Nations, the International Criminal Court. So where are you seeing this push the envelope?
Well, we're seeing it all over the world. So, for example, the Australian Parliamentary Israel Allies Caucus passed a legislation banning anti-Semitic symbols on the streets. It was actually legislation that was...
When did that pass?
That passed about 6 months ago, actually, by Andrew Wallace. He's the chair of our caucus. We see just as early as last week, we did a lot of work in the Dutch Parliament on the UNRWA issue. We brought the former chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus twice to Holland to put a demonstration on how UNRWA is being infiltrated by terrorists, how it's a terrorist organization. And just last week, they decided to pull back their funding, and they're going to phase it out within a few years. So we're seeing this all over the world, incredible support. We're seeing rallies, and you mentioned the ICC. There was a rally of 500 people with Israeli flags against the ICC. What people didn't realize is they were all Christians. Those weren't Jews standing there with the thing. They all came out. So anywhere there's anti-Israel sentiment, we're seeing Christians stand up with Israel. And I think that it's really a testament to the strength of our network, what they've accomplished in the last years. If you look at just what's happened in Congress, the Congressional Israel Allies Caucus, which is bipartisan, it's Republicans and Democrats, have been at the forefront of every pro-Israel initiative. And now, of course, with the Trump administration coming in and so many of our key allies and friends taking positions, even the director of the board of the Israel Allies Foundation is now going to be the head of the CDC of America. We're going to see a sea change in how America focuses on Israel. America and Israel's back together again.
Maybe you won't even need the caucus anymore because, they'll have everybody's already kind of a member of it.
Well, you can say that maybe the administration will be the new caucus. But no, of course, look, the importance of the caucus, and this is something that needs to be stated, is that it's always bipartisan. All right, the political pendulum always swings. Right. But for us, it doesn't matter if Yesh Atid's in power or Likud's in power, because half of our caucus is from the opposition, half is from the coalition. Nice. Our chairs are always from the Yuli Edelstein from the coalition, Moshe Tur-Paz from the opposition. The same thing is in all of our caucuses. We have 3 Democrats who chair the Congressional Israel Allies Caucus and 3 Republicans, always. So the bipartisanship of what we're doing is very important, and I think it's a large part to why we're seeing so much success no matter who's in power.
And do you have... Go ahead.
I'll just add something about you asked about the war. I felt I was on reserves duty for the first 3 months of the war. So I served in the Gaza division as a chief of operations for 3 months. And I was like 10% of my time in parliament and the rest of the time on duty. And I remember one of the first groups that came to the Gaza area, standing with Israel was a Christian leadership group that was bought, and they were almost the only ones that came to Israel on those harsh times. So I was like on a uniform, and there's a group of leaders coming to be with us, and I felt, wow, we're not alone. We have friends in the world, and they haven't forgotten us in this tough time. So that's also something that stands for me as an Israeli and as an Israeli leader, that these are my friends. They were with me. They are with me on these harsh times.
And they certainly continue to come. And I think one of the things that we saw in this war, I think even a little bit different than any of the previous crises that we've seen here, is that Christians also opened their pocketbooks. There were many, many Christian philanthropists that donated to Israel. I mean, when you even think about... now he's just
Franklin Graham.
Franklin Graham, yeah, and what he did with Magen David Adom, and but there were many examples, like that. It was really quite stunning. Tell me, what are your goals now as you're coming in for the caucus this year? Do you have any specific ideas or legislation you want to see any of the caucuses around the world or the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus specifically work on?
Well, I do hope we'll have more countries standing with Israel in the, the big challenges we have around the world with the Hague thing going on with, that's on the negative, but on the positive, moving embassies to Israel, like we've seen few countries, to Jerusalem, like we've seen few countries, and mainly standing against the anti-Semitic voices that have risen up. We've seen Amsterdam as a huge challenge. It used to be a safe place for Jews. We've seen around the United States, these Jewish communities and the State of Israel have to have their neighbors, their friends, their Christian friends, standing with them. So I do hope we will manage to behold that big wave anti-Semitic wave that has risen over Israel. And then I hope these friendships will build new bridges and new connections and new, initiatives. We'll see us doing not only against the bad, but only for the good. And that's something I hope we will see this coming year. And I hope we will also have the friendship of these people helping us bringing back our 100 hostages that are still in Gaza as we're speaking now.
And actually, I did want to ask you a question about that because right before, I think it was in March, you had actually said that the government was going to do everything in its power to bring the hostages home before Passover. And here we are right before Hanukkah, and those hostages are still not home. Hopefully, we're going to have some kind of ceasefire deal. This is, being recorded, on a Thursday, and we're going to let it out next week, and maybe over the weekend we'll have some wonderful surprise, and God willing. But, do you feel that the government has done enough to get these hostages home? If back in March you thought we could get them back, and here we are in December, and they are not home.
Well, I'd say there's a yes and there's a no. I think there's been much done, and yet we're now almost end of December, Hanukkah, as you said, and the hundreds of hostages are yet in Gaza. Now, this is the number one challenge today. If Israel wants to win this war, this is the number one challenge because as I think we've defeated Hamas, we've defeated Hezbollah.
Defeated Hamas is a bit of a stretch. They defeated the military aspects of Hamas.
On the military aspect, and yet, and Syria's changed, and we've managed to overtake some of the challenges, even on the Iran area, although that is still yet to be seen.
And Syria is yet to be seen. Al-Qaeda and ISIS have taken over.
There's no world peace, right. And yet we're in much better case than
Mashiach has not come, actually,
exactly.
So we don't have an answer
yet. And yet,
but
December 24 is much better than March 24, except for one issue, and that's our hostages in Gaza. And I think we should do more. We should do everything in our hand. And I hope also the Trump administration is showing its tremendous help on changing that situation, and I hope we'll see a change in these coming weeks.
And now you are a member of the opposition. You are in the Yesh Atid. I mean, tell me, what do you think needs to change? Does the whole government needs to be kind of up in Israel, needs to be completely appended and maybe replaced? What are the political changes that we need to see with the Trump administration coming in this golden era in Washington? How do we get that here in Israel?
Well, I do hope we'll see a kind of reset in Israeli politics. I mean, 7th of October found us divided. I would almost say almost two nations. And that's something we, the people of Israel, can't stand. We can't hold like that. And then the war brought us together. And today, more than 14 months later, we're seeing that division. Now, I think the Zionist forces of Israeli society and politics have to come together. We have to learn how to work together. Now, I do think we will have to, again, go to elections, reset our politics, and build a stronger, firmer government which will hold both sides of parliament.
More like what you saw when Yair Lapid was in place, a change-type government?
Yes, and again, I would like more right-wing parties being part of that government. And I would like all sides of the house, but the Zionist obligation, I think, the devotion to defending Israel and strengthening it has to be part of the parties that are leading the country. Now, if you're not part of, serving in the army and you're not part of Israeli economics, so maybe you should be in a position and the Zionist forces should get together. That's how I think we could get
so keep
them right.
So keep the Haredim out of the government is what we're saying.
Unless they're willing to be part of it. I don't think it's because they're Haredim. We have to have in government all the forces that are willing to work under the big challenges Israel has today. And it's both social and it's economic and it's, of course, the big dangers we still have in the Middle East today.
Now, you actually have a proposal for having Israelis and Palestinians be able to live side by side. You've actually even put that out since October 7th, which is very interesting. I mean, even just a couple days ago, I was reading about the new bill that's going to try to make it that we can't, we have to have 80 MKs vote in favor if we're going to give out any lands, and it's kind of to stop a Palestinian state. But you have said that there is a way for us to work together to live with the Palestinians. What is your plan, and how long would your plan take?
Well, I think to talk today about a Palestinian state is a mistake because we don't have any partner to work with. And I think that what we've seen from Hamas from the 7th of October, we have to also open our eyes on Judah and Samaria and understand that in those areas, many Palestinians support Hamas. So that's a huge challenge, and I don't see in the coming years a Palestinian Authority becoming anything close to a state. But, again, we can't neglect the fact there are 4 million Palestinians, 2 million in the Gaza Strip, 2 million in Judah and Samaria, and they're there to stay. And they're our neighbors, hopefully not our enemies. And we have to work with that. So I, as head of education in Jerusalem, launched an initiative of Jewish and Arab schools in Israel, meeting once a week and learning together.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Now, and I think that's the future of in Israel.
That'll take 20 years to...
Well, I actually had 200 schools, 100 Arabs and 100 Jews, learning once a week together. Okay. And I think that should be all over Israel. Okay. Now, when dealing with the Palestinians, because we have now passed legislation that takes out UNRWA as, educating the Palestinian students, we have to have good forces coming in and working on education, which will be, I don't expect it to be Zionist, but I expect it to be non-hostile and looking at the presence of Israel and the Jewish people here in the land of Israel and understanding that's a future. So we have to work on that education in the Palestinian Authority and in Gaza too. And that's something I want to be very much involved, because before I'm a legislator and before I'm an army person, I'm an educator. And education is always the future of people.
Amazing. Now, Josh, I want to flip back to you and kind of bring us back to the Christian discussion. You mentioned that there might be some shifts, or one of you mentioned the embassies. We had the Paraguay embassy open just recently. They're a Catholic country, and definitely it was Christian Zionism, not the general, evangelical we talk about, or the, Protestant Christian Zionism, but certainly it was a faith-based move, for the country. Josh, are there other countries that we're seeing that are getting ready to make that move and help to establish Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
Well, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, as if they are willing to recognize it. Yes, of course. I think that we're going to see more embassies move to Jerusalem in the next year than are in Jerusalem right now. Okay. And that's a big statement. But I understand that there are countries, and we work on this with our caucuses all over the world, in Africa, in Latin America, even in Europe, that are willing to move their embassies now that the Trump administration is coming to power. I think the next one we'll see is Argentina. I think it's going to happen very fast.
What about Malawi?
Malawi is definitely discussing it right now,
Okay.
But there's 7 countries in Africa that are discussing it. Fiji has already made a comment that they're going to move their embassy. And then we have the European bloc that have discussed it. You have Hungary, you have the Czech Republic, you have Romania. Eastern European countries are starting to discuss it more and more. And I think as the Trump administration comes in, working with the Israeli administration, there'll be some sort of package of benefits of the countries that do recognize Jerusalem, because that is official U.S. policy, and it's the policy, obviously, of the State of Israel.
And just some final thoughts. We're going to have to wrap up in just a moment. So do you have any final thoughts before we get the final thoughts from MK Tur-Paz?
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, that I don't think people realize how big a change is coming to the world when it comes to Israel. On January 20th, when Donald Trump comes in, he's going to sign a variety of executive orders. I don't think you're going to see any more lawfare like ICC. I think you're going to see the end of UNRWA. You're going to see Jerusalem embassies opening up one after another. It's a new dawn. And this is thanks to our Christian allies. This is what we've been working for the last 21 years, to mobilize Christians around the world in order to stand with Israel and really produce political action. And I think that the best is yet to come for faith-based diplomacy.
Wow, from your mouth to God's ears. That's a great ending in and of itself. But MK Tur-Paz, please, what are your final thoughts?
I think faith-based diplomacy is a great future for the world. I mean, I would like to see even Muslims, faith-based diplomacy with Muslims people. I know rabbis have been in touch with their caddies on this other side, and I do see this partnership with the Christian world as something we could take to other religions, because I really believe it's about people to people and it's about faith to faith. Right. And if we could work together and that way, that's a great path for the world. So I do see an optimistic view in these not easy times in Israel, and I do hope we will build more bridges to people, and faith to faith around the world.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for being here today and for sharing your analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maayan.